hereby given of the regular meeting of the Board of Education of the Town of Westfield in the County of Union, New Jersey, at 6 p.m. on the evening of Tuesday, February 22nd, 2022, in Cafeteria B of Westfield High School, 550 Dorian Road, Westfield, New Jersey. Please be advised that all attendees must wear masks. The Board will move immediately into private session to discuss matters rendered confidential by state and federal law, including personnel matters. The public portion of the meeting will resume at 7 p.m. The purpose of the meeting is to transact the regular business of the Board of Education and to transact any other business that may come properly before the Board. This is to advise the public and to instruct that it be recorded in the minutes that in compliance with Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of 1975, entitled the Open Public Meetings Act, the Westfield School Board on Thursday, February 17, 2022, caused to be posted at the office of the Board of Education located at 302 Elm Street, Westfield, New Jersey, and delivered to the Westfield Leader, the Star Ledger, the Westfield Library, Town Clerk of Westfield, Tap into Westfield, and Patch.com, meeting notice setting forth the time, date, and location of this meeting. Okay, you can have a roll call. Here.
Here.
All right, Mary, will you lead us in the flag salute?
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right. I ask the Board to approve the following resolution. Resolved that the Board of Education move into private session for the purpose of discussing matters rendered confidential by state and federal law, including personnel matters, and be it further resolved that any discussion held by the Board which need to remain confidential, and the results of those discussions will be made public as soon as practicable. Can I have a second? Thank you. Layla? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. We are in private session.
Okay.
I don't have another one of these, and I'm pretty sure it's got to have something to do with the connection to the audio board. So, yeah. And hopefully...
cold in here? Feels like it. Yeah. Oops. And now you can do it. You have to watch it on the video.
All right. I thank you guys for all bearing with us as we come back from private session. Just a reminder, everybody, please wear your masks tonight. You're more than welcome to take your mask down to take a sip of water, but please keep it up for the duration of the meeting. On that, we are back in public session, and we'll start with announcements. Sahar? We only have 2 tonight, so.
The Westfield Community Center and the Westfield Neighborhood Council are celebrating Black History Month with a dinner and dance party this Friday at the Shady Rest Golf and Country Club, the first Black-owned golf club in the country. While fortunately for the organizers, the event is sold out, the Community Center and Neighborhood Council are accepting donations. Please call the WCC at 908-232-4759 or the WNC at 908-233-2772 if you would like to make a donation to these nonprofit social service organizations.
The district had planned to further outline its preliminary budget 2022-2023 school year to include state aid, along with an updated health benefit projected increases at our next meeting on March 1st. Due to the delay in receipt of state aid information, next week's meeting on March 1st is canceled. The next Board of Education meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, March 15th at 7 p.m. here in Cafeteria B at Westfield High School. An additional board meeting has been scheduled for Tuesday, March 22nd at 7 p.m. also here in the cafeteria. The complete agenda for March 15th meeting will be available on Friday, March 11th at the board tab at www.westfieldnjk12.org. The meeting will also be live streamed via the district YouTube channel, which viewers can access by clicking on the board meetings recordings current year on the board tab of the district website. And that's it for announcements tonight, and I will turn it district administration reports.
Thank you. Before we get started with our 2 presentations this evening, I did want to provide a brief update regarding our COVID plans, our COVID mitigation plans, in light of the governor's announcement to lift the mandated universal masking policy for schools starting March 7th. So at the last meeting, it was really fresh off the governor's announcement. I was not comfortable committing to, just simply saying that masks will be optional on March 7th because I didn't have any information, quite honestly. But I did confer with our health officials to see what the guidance was going to be, or whether or not we were in fact going to be receiving the guidance. And I'm pleased to say that more information is expected to arrive this week. So I did want to use an opportunity just to provide some details regarding the next couple of weeks. It's still unclear, quite honestly, what the full impact of the governor's lifting of the universal mask mandate will be on March 7th. However, at a minimum, there are certain things that we definitely do know. We do know that local and state COVID activity has decreased significantly to levels that we have not seen since the summer. The Cali index, the COVID activity level index for our region is yellow, which is moderate, and the entire state is moderate. And once again, that has not been the case for our region since the summer. And as recently as last month, we were in red, 2 levels above that, which is the most severe and highest level of activity. So we're seeing all the things that we hoped to see and wanted to see come to fruition, which is fewer COVID cases entering our schools. At this time, I am comfortable stating that masks will be optional in most instances. And you have to understand, and please bear with me as I provide the caveats. In most cases, I could tell you that the opportunity for staff and students to make those decisions for themselves, along with their families, will be certainly something that we will support and we will encourage everyone to respect. However, there are going to be some exceptions, and those exceptions are going to be dictated to us or recommended to us. In the case of the federal transportation requirements, that all public transportation still requires masking on the school buses, that is not an area of discretion that we have. So there's an instance where masks are not optional because the federal government has made that mandate clear. Now, the other areas that I do not have the answers to are those areas that we hope will be filled in through the additional guidance by the Department of Health. So some of the questions that we're still looking or waiting on answers to include what we are expected to do or how we are expected to incorporate masks or the lack of masks when making decisions about isolation or quarantine. So you may or may not be aware that if a student is deemed positive to have COVID-19, they will isolate for 5 days, and then if they're asymptomatic would be able to return, but they'd be expected to and required to wear a mask. So if the mask optional policy is in force, but the return to school options still require that a student wear a mask, that may be an instance where the option is no longer available in order to comply with the return to school. Likewise, we may have individuals who are considered close contacts. Again, those close contacts up to this point have factored in that whether or not students were wearing masks. And if they're wearing masks, maintain their social distance, were asymptomatic, individuals would not have to necessarily quarantine if they were showing no signs of symptoms, but they came into contact with someone who was positive. In a case where masks are optional and the individual who was positive or the individual in close contact was not wearing a mask, we don't know how that would factor into the decision making or the recommendation. So those are the types of questions that the administration and health staff are waiting to find answers to, which is the reason why I can't say across the board that the mask optional policy would be possible. But in most other cases, I don't see why it would not be able to remain in place. We also don't know what the status of the remaining mitigation measures, such as social distancing, students facing forward, all those things that we've put in place. I certainly would anticipate would be revised by the Department of Health over time, but we don't know whether or not that's going to be impacted in the near future or in the more distant future down the road. So while I don't expect the lifting of the mask mandate to mark the immediate end of our mitigation efforts, it's certainly a sign for a brighter future for all of us. But we also recognize that the March 7th transition will bring mixed emotions and experiences for everyone. Therefore, as I alluded to earlier, it will be critical for our schools to work with our staff, our students, and families to ensure that everyone's personal decision is respected and that we continue to support one another as we make this transition. Hopefully by the end of this week, I'll have the guidance from the Department of Health that will allow me to work with the regional health department and our administration to provide a more definitive update as to what March 7th will look like. But as I started with, the March 7th opportunity for us to comply with the optional mask policy will by and large be in place. The nuances of when it will be required I do not have at this moment, but look forward to sharing with the community by next week. That concludes that portion of my report. For the next presentation, I'm going to ask Dr. Pinero, Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum Instruction, to join me as we provide a brief overview of our progress report towards our district goals. For those who may not be aware, all of our presentations are posted on our agenda. So if you visit our website and locate our agenda for the evening, the presentations are each hyperlinked so that you could download a copy of the presentation and are listed under the public attachments for the meeting as well. So beginning with the start of the school year, the board within my first really 4 to 6 weeks of joining the district, the board and I engaged in a discussion about district goals for the year. And district goals, I just want to sort of orient everyone, are intended to be those high-level priorities for the district. Those areas of focus that we will be spending time on and also be providing updates on, as you see this evening. But they don't represent the only things that we focus on. They don't represent the only metrics that we are measured on. We have assessment data that is reported out on. We have violence and vandalism data that we also report out on, along with our harassment, intimidation, and bullying statistics. So that the goals that you're going to hear about this evening are really those areas of focus that have been the responsibility of the administration to emphasize, to delve deeper, and to provide progress reports to the board and the community starting this evening. The first goal, probably no surprise to anyone, is we're starting back in the 21-22 school year with full in-person learning, and therefore transitioning from a hybrid experience last year to a full in-person experience this year. We wanted to make a goal that provided for that safe return to in-person learning, focusing on three areas: student and staff wellness, health and safety, and educational continuity. If you look at the area of student wellness, what our schools have done is maximize their in-person experiences to work with their staff, work with their counselors, work with their teachers, even work with their parent-teacher organizations to create an environment that is welcoming, nurturing, and trying to provide an experience for our students. I don't want to say that is normal, because under the circumstances, we can't imagine that wearing masks is something that has been normal for our students, but one that still provides the excitement and the enthusiasm of being back in our classrooms. So in addition to all of those things that had taken place throughout the course of the year that created that positive culture and climate in our schools, we also provided additional opportunities to focus on student wellness, as you see outlined on this slide, including the addition of a student assistance counselor at the high school. This is a position that has not existed for a long time, but we were able to take advantage of the American Relief Funds to be able to reinstitute into our school district and at the high school to provide targeted support to our students there. In addition, we've had a number of administrators and staff attend professional development sessions in order to continue to bolster their knowledge and capacity to support our students' mental health and well-being. A number of the topics you see listed there. As I mentioned, the wellness goal isn't just focusing on students, it's also looking at our staff. We wanted to make sure that as we engage in a full-time, full in-person learning experience, that we recognize that our students may not be the only ones who may be a little uneasy or feeling uneasy. We also wanted to recognize that some of our staff would also require supports as well. Not some of our staff, all of our staff. So throughout the course of the year, we did promote our employee assistance program, which is an online system that allows employees to take advantage of resources to help reduce their stress. And yep. Oh, okay. So that the employee assistance program really provides an outlet and a resource for our staff to be able to access off hours or even on hours in order to provide them with the resources and strategies to manage their own stress and anxiety. We also provided both department and building level experiences that allowed staff to be able to engage in strategies that they learned from one another or from individuals who had come in to help them understand and manage their own stress over the course of the year. We want to make sure that our administrators work with our teachers during those times to ensure that we're all checking in on one another and ensuring that we take care of each other. In the realm of health and safety, these are things that are tried and true practices that have been in place since the start of the pandemic back in the spring of 2020, and certainly entering into the world of education and the hybrid year of the prior year and continuing into this year. And those are the mitigation strategies of hand washing, sanitization, social distancing, wearing masks, all those things that we wanted to make sure were in place in order to reduce the likelihood of COVID coming into our buildings, and even more so from that spread taking place that would potentially require that we quarantine classrooms, grade levels, or schools altogether. So with that in mind, we provided those visual confirmation, whether it be the signs or the sanitization stations, for all of our schools, as well as the regular reminders to our students, staff, and families of their responsibilities to provide those daily wellness checks to ensure that students are coming to schools healthy, and certainly making sure that we follow up with the families if we see that anyone is not feeling well. We also recognize that on a daily basis, our administrators, our staff, and our nurses have been working around the clock to ensure that they make appropriate decisions regarding COVID cases. Individuals who may be positive, individuals that may present symptoms that may be related to COVID, and all those close contacts in between were part of the daily interactions and decisions that our administration and nursing staff had to make each and every day in coordination with our district physician, our nurse coordinator, and certainly our regional health officer. Each of our buildings were also subject to the same level of cleaning and sanitization and disinfecting that had maintained safe environments over the prior year. Those same strategies were in place for this year to ensure that our student learning environments remain safe for students and staff. And then one notable item that I do want to highlight is the fact that the ventilation projects that were budgeted for by during the prior budget development season included the ventilation of our gymnasiums, our all-purpose rooms, as well as nurses' offices, and therefore ensuring that we had adequate fresh air exchanges and climate controls in all of those spaces. Moving on to educational continuity. The educational continuity was really a goal that was, or an aspect of the goal that tried to recognize that even with everyone coming back full time, there would be instances where students may have to quarantine or isolate due to their either COVID positive status or even being a close contact. And therefore, with our focus on full day in-person instruction, we did our best to ensure that we provided a commensurate learning experience for individuals who are in the classroom in live learning situations, and providing them, the students who are home, with access to information through the use of our Google Classroom learning management system to be able to ensure that what was being taught in the classroom would be accessible to the individuals at home. At the elementary, middle, and high school level, we then used our varying resources to be able to provide students with either access to a teacher to provide live instruction and support during the course of the day, or use our existing staff to provide check-in and academic support or office hours to assist. It was absolutely a major change from the hybrid model that we had before, but recognizing that the majority of our students were in the class, we needed to balance our supports, and our use of utility subs, substitute teachers, our use of existing staff and duties was our way to still make sure that there was a human touch point over the course of the experience. So the other aspect of educational continuity that was imperative for us to pay attention to was our focus on using data and assessments to identify our students' learning needs, both based upon what they did not learn last year, again, different from the notion of learning loss, where they may have learned something and somehow forgotten it, we tried to focus on unfinished learning as a more accurate description of what students just didn't get a chance to learn last year because of the curricular adjustments that we had to make. So in order to then assess where our students were in moving into this year, we were able to use local assessments, reading inventory, benchmark assessments, and so on and so forth, along with the Start Strong assessments that Dr. Pinero and our content supervisors presented on our last meeting to really help fill in the gaps for our staff to be able to make the most of learning this year, to make sure our students are caught up and continuing to learn at the grade level that they are currently at. So when we look at the next steps for the remainder of this year in this for this goal, we will continue to review and refine our implementation measures to keep our schools safe for in-person learning. The updates that I referenced in my earlier comments are an example of that. We are not looking to remain the same way we were in September when we see that the COVID conditions and the information that we are receiving is getting updated. So therefore, we will continue to revisit our practices as we enter the spring. And then last but not least, continue to establish community partnerships to provide access to mental health providers to our students and our staff in a way that supports them through the remainder of the school year. Moving on, for the next two goals, I'm going to invite Dr. Pinero to come up to speak about our progress towards district goal number 2 and 3.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez. Good evening. So district goal number 2 is student achievement, support student growth and academic achievement through a focus on the continuous review and refinement of curriculum and professional development. This achievement goal covers a broad spectrum of, quote, continuous review and refinement of curriculum and professional development. But this review and refinement is really a standard practice. But in particular to this goal, we focused on learning through the pandemic and adjusting curriculum accordingly, as well as implementing new standards from the State Department. So one such area of the new standards is the health and PE curriculum. I'd like to echo what Dr. Gonzalez said earlier about, so many of the things that we take on in a year could be goals. This one in particular, the revision of health and PE curriculum, really emanated from some sentiments that we've heard from the public, even going back to last year and some this year, about what the new standards and even new legislation might look like. And this has been part of, not just the New Jersey conversation, but beyond. So we wanted to be as transparent as possible, present to the public what our plan is, and that's why it's part of the goal. So this year we had professional development on these new standards and legislation. We've consulted experts and collected resources to pull from. We've established a timeline for getting the 3 grade spans of curricula completed in late spring. There are 2 links on this slide for when it's posted that are helpful for community members to take a deeper dive into the standards and resources if they choose. The first link provides the state's grade span by grade span standards. The way it's set up is it's by the end of 2nd grade, students will be able to or will have experienced. Then it's grade up, by the end of grade 5, and then by the end of grade 8, and then by the end of high school. So that's the first link. The second link provides many resources that the state has posted from an organization that has done a really good job of pulling together curriculum, presentations for teachers to use if they choose, lessons, activities, even assessments. So if anyone wants to get a good sense of what resources we will be looking towards for the curriculum revision, those 2 links could be very helpful. So a little bit more on the 3 standards for the health, and so it's the comprehensive health and physical education standards. Standard 1 is personal and mental health. So that focuses, for example, on topics such as hygiene, puberty, mental wellness, and sex education. Standard 2.2 is physical wellness. These are areas that we associate with physical education in a traditional way. And then there's standard 2.3, safety, which includes topics such as substance abuse and personal safety, For example, being mindful of strangers for the younger children, and then for older students, maybe later middle school years, to learn about problems that might be associated with dating. There's legislation attached to those as well, and they're reflected in those standards. I've also included in the bottom of this slide some language from the state encouraging parents, specifically with regard to sexual education, to have their students participate in the instruction on these important topics. But again, in the case of sexual education, children can be excluded by parental request if the topic is in conflict with conscience, moral, or religious beliefs. Later on in the year, as we start to complete the comprehensive health and physical education curriculum, we'll provide more information to the board and the public as to what that means with regard to exclusion. And we will also provide professional development to teachers so that they can handle any new aspects of sexual education that they may not have had experience with before, and also communicate with parents about how it is delivered in the classroom, and maybe parents who have concerns can have those concerns alleviated, and students can still experience the instruction as planned. So another aspect of the student achievement goal is in the area of curriculum. Our content area supervisors and I are preparing the implementation of DEI requirements by reviewing curricula and looking for gaps in the instruction as it applies to diversity, equity, and inclusion. A New Jersey Department of Education link is provided on this slide for those who are interested in the kind of resources we are consulting. The state posted these recently, and there's some really useful materials associated with that site. In the area of professional development, the heavy lift on this was conducted in the beginning of the months of the school year, when content area supervisors used student performance and readiness data taken from benchmark assessments to address any gaps in student learning. Each year we do that as part of regular practice as far as providing benchmark or baseline assessments really for students, so that we then know where to go. That was more important, with students individually and as groups. That's more important than ever because of the pandemic, and I feel we were very successful in identifying those gaps. So what was learned from these assessments was then applied in professional development with teachers so that they can make adjustments to their instruction. And then drilling a little more deeply, this data enabled us to identify students who might have needs for deeper support, more academic support. We discussed that a little bit last meeting with regard to Start Strong. So another professional development objective target this year has been a K-5 initiative to introduce responsive classroom into the responsive classroom approach into the classrooms. The responsive classroom is a student-centered, social-emotional learning approach that is integrated into their course of regular instruction. The professional development for this SEL-based goal was a substantial investment, but that was granted to the district by the Westfield Foundation, so I wanted to thank them publicly for that. And in the first phase of the training, so last summer we had 50% of our K-5 teachers volunteer for the training so that they had all 4 days. We still wanted to have an experience throughout the grades and throughout the schools, so those teachers, with support of also the consultants we were working with, then turnkeyed one aspect of responsive classroom, which is morning meeting. That's the foundation for responsive classroom, where you establish the norms and the expectations for the day, and you do so in an engaging way. I mean, that picture is just one example where students are sharing some information and they pass on what that looks like, some kind of like stuffed animal or something. So they get more adjusted to being social, and they start off their day that way, while also achieving part of the curriculum and instruction. So 50% of the teachers were trained in the summer, and then we had some turnkey training for everybody to do morning meeting. And then there was a book study too with regard to morning meeting. So that in this summer coming up, 2022, the other 50% will get the full complement of the training. So while those teachers, the other 50% that will be trained this summer, have a good working knowledge of a big important foundational piece, and they've been implementing this year, they will then get the full complement of the training as their peers did the year before. So for district goal number 2, our next steps, we're going forward with the responsive classroom. Actually, I just kind of covered that. We would be having the other 50% go this summer. We'll also analyze the DEI standards for any gaps. So that analysis that the supervisors and I will do as far as the curriculum is concerned and DEI standards expectations, we'll identify any kinds of gaps, and then we will develop instructional activities for students so that we make sure that we're fully covering everything we can. And then we'll also continue to follow the timeline set for professional development and completing revisions of the health and PE curriculum. So the thing is, like for PE and health as an example, we provided some upfront training so that teachers would have a good sense of what the law says and what the standards are. Then as we go into writing it, they'll have that working understanding, but then there will be follow-up training so that they can really get a good sense and have questions answered, because they deserve all the support they can get going into the classroom on how to approach some of the topics. Okay, so that brings us to goal number 3, and this is our diversity, equity, and inclusion goal. So the main initial thrust for the year was to develop a framework to promote DEI in the areas of professional development. So each, piece of that circle represents one of the 5. So it's professional development, recruitment, selection, and retention of diverse candidates, curriculum and curricular materials, community engagement, and school-wide programming. I'll touch a little bit more on those as we go along. So first, the framework. So our DEI steering committee met many times in the fall to develop a framework for the goal that would integrate principles that are found in our mission statement along with the new state standards. This framework has been shared with the Community Advisory Committee, which has provided feedback as well as sharing helpful resources. We'll take a further step with the Advisory Committee in March. An additional resource for the district that will provide valuable guidance in meeting our goal is an equity audit that is being conducted by Hanover Research. This audit is just getting underway. The researchers will be doing both a qualitative and quantitative study of our district through the lens of equity as it relates to student services, programs, school practices, and many other areas in which we must always strive to assure equity for all students and staff. Okay, this is one of my favorite slides because I like the tree. So the tree has 5 sort of bubbles on the outside of it, and in the center it's pretty much the idea of beginning with sort of dream, then define your dream, and then it continues on through the idea of realizing the dream. The outside really represents the 5 subcommittees doing the work. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that work that has to be done and who will be doing it. So in order to attain the objectives of district goal number 3, we've established 5 subcommittees. Our K-12 content area supervisors are conducting the DEI curriculum audit. I referenced that a little earlier. The Human Resources Department is doing the work of recruiting, selecting, and retaining candidates from diverse backgrounds. The district's Professional Development Committee is working closely with the DEI Steering Committee to provide their insights in the area of professional development. So that's 3 of the 5, and then the other 2 for school-wide programming, anyone from guidance counselors to club advisors, student committees, supervisors of the Code of Conduct, special education, intervention, gifted education services, all school-wide programs will be utilizing the data that we receive from Hanover Associates, their DEI audit, to adjust programs as needed. And lastly, the category of community engagement is a subcommittee, and the DEI committee is planning virtual information sessions on DEI topics, as well as working closely with our community relations department to communicate opportunities for community to learn more and participate in DEI activities if they choose. So, next steps. The next step, I may have touched on them a little bit, but I like to reinforce them. So there will be a DEI equity survey distributed to the community. We'll analyze those survey results, and that will inform the work we do going forward. Again, there's that DEI curriculum subcommittee. That's really important. I mean, that's where the learning happens. That's where we assure that all the important aspects of what it means to live in a world, in a diverse world with equity and inclusiveness. That's the heart of what we're here to do. So that's part of it. That's why the curriculum audit is so important. Also continue the DEI professional development for all staff. And we'll utilize communication survey, and I think that's referenced in the next goal, the feedback from that to share DEI initiatives and community engagement opportunities. So I think that's it for goal 5.
So just rounding out the report this evening, I just want to spend a few moments on goal number 4, which is focusing on communications. I remember during the development of the district goals, the topic of communications came up as an area of great need and concern. You know, the way we communicate with our stakeholders, both our staff in schools, our families, and our students, requires that we are transparent. It sometimes gets a bad rap when you use the T word, because some people think that the transparency is something that we hide from. But the truth of the matter is, it is our responsibility to provide as clear and concise communication to our community, and therefore I do not shy away from that notion and truly embrace this as a district goal. So focusing on providing clear, concise, and consistent messaging, we moved into starting our work this year by inventorying what our existing methods are. So there are 10 schools in the district, multiple departments, multiple opportunities for information to be shared, and without having the means to know what those opportunities were, it would have been hard, if not impossible, to really coordinate messaging across those opportunities. So that's why the first experience really focused on trying to gather as much information about what those communication vehicles look like. And then we moved into gathering feedback from our school community. So in January, we issued our first family community survey focusing on communications in order to get feedback on how we communicated so far this year, looking at vehicles such as email, our newsletter, our district social media accounts, and our website, as well as how we communicate out with the town or use our PTOs to help send messages to our school community. All that information was then gathered and analyzed, and we also have plans to issue similar surveys to our students and staff for feedback in the coming months. So just a quick overview or look at our survey results. Of the surveys that we did get back, we had 186 respondents. The majority of the respondents, vast majority, were parents or guardians in the district, but we did have some community members respond as well. The majority of the individuals, say 83% of the respondents, access the internet via their handheld device. So that certainly speaks volumes about how we communicate with our constituents and our stakeholders when we see that they're consuming information or gathering information from a device that could fit in the palm of their hand. The newsletter that we initiated this year on a monthly basis to provide information to our community, or at least establish that vehicle, was well received, as well as additional ideas were provided for future topics. Many had responded that the website is effective at providing information, but also many had described it as cumbersome, challenging, or antiquated, which certainly speaks to a need to refresh our website, which is in the works for the coming school year. Another aspect of communications that we delved into through the survey was looking at social media, and it seemed that the majority of the respondents had Facebook accounts, with Instagram being a close second. But we also found interesting that many of the respondents did not report having a Twitter account, but we do have about 2,700 plus Twitter followers that grows each month. So it really helped to provide us with a sense of where individuals are going for information, how they're gathering it, and how many of our stakeholders that we surveyed aren't necessarily the consumers of that information. And I'm certainly curious as to what our students and staff will provide when they respond to the survey in the coming months. We also looked at the use of our emergency alert system. That system is used infrequently to send district-wide messages out. Certainly when there's an inclement weather announcement to be made or district-wide message regarding a COVID update, we try to use the alert messaging system, and many reported being satisfied with how we use that. And we did ask for feedback on our board meetings and how we are conducting our board meetings, both in person with a live stream when it works, for individuals to both access in real time and also access when the meetings are over and we archive them on YouTube. The majority of the respondents did not attend in person, but many of those who do found the meetings to be effective. Whereas there were individuals who did find that improvements were necessary or even ineffective altogether. But it was interesting to note that there were a number of individuals who responded that didn't even were unaware of in-person meetings as a method to stay informed. So again, an opportunity for us to help communicate and promote these meetings to our stakeholders. 36% of the respondents did not use our live stream meeting, but those who did found it, some found it effective. But again, I find it, noteworthy that there is still a segment of the respondents who didn't even know that the live stream was an option. So clear areas for us to look at more closely to see how we could spread the word. And then last but not least, one of the things that we also include as a follow-up to our board meetings is a synopsis of the board meeting. It's an overview. It does not take the place of our official board minutes, but it just highlights some of the key presentations, discussing items that took place, as well as major action items that occurred at the board meeting. So many individuals had provided feedback on it. But again, there was a large number who were either unaware of it or did not use it to stay connected. So we certainly are looking forward to promoting that resource as well. We also included in our goal, an active tracking of our analytics, our community engagement through the data that we receive from our social media feeds or our website, in order to see the level of traffic that we have. And as you can see on the analytics slide, we do have a number of Facebook followers that has increased in September, as well as Twitter followers. And just note that our Facebook followers it looks slightly off from our Twitter followers, and that's because in 2019, I was informed that we had to rebuild our Facebook presence after our account was shut down. So starting a Facebook account and getting the word out takes some time to rebuild that following. And for this year, we also introduced a few different communication enhancements. I had mentioned already the newsletter, which is a monthly publication that goes out to all the communities, as well as posted on our website. Our YouTube channel is a much more user-friendly means of housing our videos and our video meetings, our video montages that are compiled throughout the course of the year and the school years, to make it easier for individuals to have access to that information on their devices or at home. As I mentioned, the live streaming of board meetings and being able to refine that process is a work in progress, so I appreciate everyone's patience. And then last but not least, and most recently, in response to a number of questions that we've often received, we have created a frequently asked questions portion of our website to try and house exactly those frequently asked questions that come up whether it be at board meetings or even emails that are received by members of the board or the administration, that certainly could benefit the entire community. So we wanted to keep that all in one place, and again, introduce that as a new initiative this year. And moving into the remainder of the school year, we are planning to launch a new website and a new mobile app in the summer of 2022. And therefore, work will be continuing throughout the remainder of this school year to prepare for that launch. We are also looking to develop a communications plan based upon all the feedback that we've received and all the inventorying that we've done this year, in order to maximize our communication strategies and to ensure that our message is getting out as prominently and as effectively as we hoped it would. And then, as indicated and mentioned earlier, our video use of video and multimedia is certainly something that we want to take full advantage of in order to promote our schools, promote our district. If you haven't gotten a chance to see our most recent video brochure, in order to promote our Lincoln Early Childhood Center, we created a video brochure for any incoming families, and it really does an amazing job of being able to provide an overview of what the school is and what the offerings for our early childhood education experience would entail. So please take a moment to check that out on our YouTube page as well. And then last but not least, we have ongoing community outreach opportunities that are part of the work of this administration, this Board of Education, and certainly this community, to be able to engage the school district with the work of the Westfield community at large. So that was just a snapshot of the work that has been taking place this year towards our district goals. Again, not by any stretch of the imagination an exhaustive line of work for all of our schools and administrators, but just in the key areas identified in the goals. So before we move on to the next presentation, if there are any questions from members of the board?
No, I'm just to reiterate, this presentation will be available on the website?
Yes.
And the links that you mentioned, people can link through the presentation to find out more information, right?
Yes, thank you. This presentation is currently active on our website, has links embedded into the agenda and as a downloadable attachment at the end. And as a PDF, it would include live hyperlinks, so all of the resources that Dr. Pinero mentioned to be able to dig deeper and look further would be active for any member of the community.
So first, I want to thank you, Dr. Gonzalez, and I want to thank Dr. Pinero for all of their hard work, and our teachers and our staff. I just want to emphasize for the record how supportive I am of the DEI audit and the DEI process, and highlight the importance of the specific topics in DEI, and also maybe highlight some things that are missing, which are not due to the fault of this district, but perhaps just some absences and gaps in the law. Although I do hope that we will still address them because we have the discretion. So the first is, I'm glad that we're going to be teaching Holocaust and genocide in accordance with the Holocaust Mandate Law, which was passed in 1994. That we're going to be teaching our children about the contributions of LGBTQ communities in accordance with Public Law 2019, which was passed on January 31st, 2019 by the New Jersey Legislature. We're going to be teaching our students about African American history in accordance with the Amistad Commission, which was passed in 2002. And we're going to be teaching our children about Asian Pacific Islander history, which is, well, according to a law, S4021, which was just passed and is binding on school districts starting in 2022-2023. Unfortunately, there are two other topics that are not mandated by law, but hopefully we will teach our children, which is about Arab American history and about Islamophobia. New Jersey has the largest Muslim population as a percentage of the population in the country, which is 3%, and Arab Americans also comprise 1% of the population. So hopefully we will also be educating our students about those very diverse communities. But in sum, I'm thrilled that we're doing DI. I heavily support it. I strongly support it, and I look forward to getting the results of the DEI audit.
the communications portion of this. So that's the communication between the board and the district and parents is something that anyone who knows me knows I have been very vocal about in the past and will continue to do so, from this end. And I would say that as recently as a year ago, certainly before Dr. Gonzalez was here, that communication was virtually non-existent, and certainly, this was not effective. And what I see now is a superintendent who is making every effort to improve on that. I think that's a lot of work done in a very short span of time to get us from a very low level to a workable level. And I know there's more to be done, which is why I want to point it out. I noticed the commitment just in the conversations we've had and what we've seen here, and I know the effort's there, and I also know in speaking to other parents that the effort, I think, is increased as well from parents to reach out to the board with the questions that they have. My concern is that sometimes the best efforts aren't necessarily meeting in the same place, and one of the goals was to look at more effective ways to make sure communication was happening. So it will surprise, perhaps not surprising, one of the best ways to improve communication is to communicate about it. So one of the things that I would like to suggest as part of the additional methods, and the path is great, expand the social media, the handheld devices, all of that makes a lot of sense. But I think what we want to do is get to a fundamental point where we're making sure that the messages we're sending to each other are actually reaching each other in the ways in which they're intended to be heard. So I'd like to suggest, just as part of these additional efforts to see communication, is perhaps a parents' roundtable of sorts, where maybe quarterly you could meet with a group of parents to say, hey, look, here's what I'm sending out, here's what I'm talking about. Is it the best way to reach you, right? Are we really seeing, and as we do these studies, we see, we have a certain amount of followers, but we're not sure why nobody's using it. And sometimes the behavior isn't always necessarily reflected by the data. So I think that might be a very effective way to help out, is to say, look, we're all doing our best here to get stuff together, and that might just help you from a feedback perspective to say, okay, I know what I'm doing, I'm probably 80% of the way there, but maybe a conversation like that can get you to 100%. So it's just something I'd like to suggest you consider. I think it'd be helpful all the way around and make both your message heard better and parents feel like, well, there's a dialogue here too. So just a suggestion for you.
Thank you. Okay.
One comment I was looking at, which I'm glad to see the preliminary survey results. I mean, it's considered to be a small sampling, relatively 186 respondents, but it's a good direction. And in particular, like when we look at the people how they're finding out the information, I think will be helpful. And I have some ideas that I can show you afterwards about, like, for example, we have people going to Facebook, but we're streaming on YouTube. And people aren't seeing those videos as part of their feed, where whether it's live right now, they're at home and they want to be alerted to that, or they want to check their feed out later and they go and see it within their normal feed. So it's just one pinpoint example, but I think we have to look more into this data and determine how do we shift our communications to adjust the way Westfield wants to consume this information. And I see we're already doing that with the mobile application with 82% on there, but I think we got to look into it even further.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Gonzalez, for the update on our goals.
Since I'm already standing, moving into the next presentation, last board meeting we sought to be able to start our conversation as a Board of Education, administration, and really public with regards to the development of the upcoming school year's district operating budget, really with a conversation that looked at where we've been to understand where we are today. And as, go back to the previous slide. Yep, so at the last meeting, we focused on really looking at a historical view that took us over 10 years back, because it's really important to understand that our budget today has actually been impacted by decisions that were made and imposed upon school districts extending as far back as 2010 and soon thereafter. And as a result, the district operating budget that has been adopted over the many preceding years to today had been able to sustain the quality of education that is necessary to keep our schools and our students learning at the highest level possible, but with very creative and very efficient means of using the financial tools that we have at our disposal. And once again, I do want to give credit to Dana Sullivan, our business administrator, who had been working with the administration and boards of education over the last several years to be able to get us to the point where we are today. Our schools are thriving, our facilities are continually being improved upon, and we are able to accommodate the needs of an expanding school district while our revenues are limited each and every year. But that was all to bring us to the point where we are today, because I think we're finding that those challenges now are becoming somewhat insurmountable. So in the next portion of the presentation, which we're going to go through today, we're going to go into a little greater depth regarding the revenue that we have available, or that we may have available, as well as the expenditures, because it needs to be clear that we are still at a point where we're waiting on key pieces of financial information to come from our health benefits provider, as well as, or broker, as well as from the State Department of Education or in the governor's office with our state aid. So without having those key pieces of information, we can't confirm what our budget needs or opportunities are at this time. But this evening, we're going to provide an overview of what we do know in order to frame the conversation, which, as mentioned earlier during the announcements, will then be followed by a March 15th preliminary budget presentation that will have all of the final numbers for the board to review, prior to then being placed on a March 22nd agenda for approval in order to meet our statutory requirement to submit the budget to the county for review. So what I'd like to do is at this time hand it over to our business administrator, Dana Sullivan, to walk through the next few slides to continue the presentation.
Thank you. So on this slide, you can see our various sources of revenue. Our largest, and if you remember from last week's presentation, about 93% of the budget comes from tax levy, local tax levy, and that is by far the largest, obviously, part of our budget. Fund balance is unreserved surplus that we have available to us to use as revenue in the following year's budget. And at this point, we are estimating that to continue at $750,000. In the first column there, you can see we're estimating state aid to stay flat at the same level as 2021-22, which would be $5.5 million. The second column, we've estimated an increase of $500,000. Although enrollment is decreasing, and that would normally translate into a decrease in state aid, because the federal government has given states a lot of money for COVID relief, we are anticipating that possibly we'll get some of that, some of those funds. So we did do a scenario where we got the same increase that we did receive this year, which would be $500,000. Extraordinary aid is not part of our basic state aid. That is an aid we apply for. We don't get notice of that until the very end of the fiscal year. So what we're budgeting for 22-23, I won't really know that number until June or July of 2023. So we're estimating that at 975. It could possibly be higher, but we wouldn't have any way to really know. Interest income, we're estimating at $200,000, and our other incomes are $527,000. So in column one, we're estimating $115.5 million in revenue. And then with that possible increase of state aid, we're at 116.0. Could we be somewhere in between or less, probably, possibly. I don't anticipate we would be much higher than the $500,000 increase. But again, we were supposed to receive those numbers this week actually. We were supposed to receive them Thursday. The governor pushed his message off to March 8th, which means we won't receive state aid information until March 10th. So we're still going to have a quick turnaround from March 10th to March 15th board meeting, but we will on March 15th have all of those actual state aid numbers. On the next slide, we're anticipating a couple of scenarios for expenditures. So the first column, we have our health benefit calculation as presented to us by our brokers in January. The reason we are waiting for updated information is because the beginning of the school year, our expenses were running very, very high. It's not uncommon for us to have higher expenses in the summer because the large majority of our staff do not work in the summer, so they do have elective procedures or they will go to visit doctors. But this year it was much higher than normal. So the projected budget increases we got in January were 10.8% increase on our health benefits. We are hoping that number will come down based on the last couple of months that we've seen that the numbers seem to have been leveling off. And we do expect that number at the end of this week. So again, on March 15th, we will have updated information as far as health insurance. The other areas of the budget have increased based on either contracts or estimates based on where we see the costs of contracts and other supplies, transportation, and other things that we're going to need. So those are somewhat fixed as far as the increases. This slide is shown because the question would become with our self-insurance for health insurance, does it make sense to continue there? We will, of course, as we do annually, get quotes for a fully insured plan, and we'll compare that. We'll also get quotes for a state health benefit plan and compare that. But if you look back, in 2014-15 is when we began our self-insured plan, and we were at roughly $13 million the first year. 7% increases are somewhat normal. Sometimes they go higher, sometimes lower, but an average is 7% for health insurance. Also considering that during that time period, our staff was increasing. So if our health insurance at 2013 had increased every year by 7% for a fully insured plan, that's where that white line would be. For the self-insured plan, our actual costs were the yellow line. So you can see that the self-insurance was significantly less than what a fully insured plan would be. And we still appear to be in a better shape by continuing with our self-insured plan. But again, before we renew any contracts in June, we will certainly look at that. The next slide shows, sorry, I moved too fast on mine. Looking at those two scenarios, so looking at flat state aid with a 10.8% increase in state aid, revenue, as I noted earlier, was $115.5 million, and you can see here the expenditures are $119.7 million. So with that scenario, we are $4.1 million over cap. With the other scenario where we receive an increase in state aid of $500,000 and possibly a 7% increase in health insurance, we're looking at $2.9 million over cap. So we are looking at reductions that are rather significant in order to get to cap. Could they be, again, it could be somewhere in between. My best guess would be that the number would be somewhere in between these two numbers. But that's information we'll know in the next couple of weeks, and we will be prepared to share all that information with the board and the public on March 15th. So the next steps for the budget will be, again, March 15th, we will have a presentation that'll include state aid, actual state aid figures, updated insurance projections. And then on March 22nd, we will ask the board to adopt that budget for submission to the county superintendent. It is due to the county on March 28th, so we don't have too much flexibility with these dates. The original due date was March 21st. They did extend that a week in light of the 2-week delay for state aid. And then on April 26th, the board will hold a public hearing and vote on the final adoption of the budget. And that concludes this presentation. Does the board have any questions or comments?
Can you explain, for anyone who doesn't know, what the health plan, the self-financed health plan entails?
So, yes, so we do not pay a premium at all for any of our employees or their dependents. We do pay Horizon to administer that plan. So we pay them a per-person flat fee. And then our health insurance is based on the claims that are submitted. So any time a person goes to a doctor or, has any procedure or anything, we pay based on that actual claim. We pay weekly, so the claims can vary from week to week. We do have insurance, a stop-loss insurance. We have several types of stop-loss insurance. So on each individual, we have $200,000 stop-loss, meaning that when an individual hits the $200,000 mark, the insurance policy kicks in. And then we have a policy district-wide, where if we reach a certain level district-wide, the insurance kicks in. So what makes it hard, first, there's a couple of things that make it hard to predict. First of all, HIPAA laws do not allow us to access to details. So it's not really possible to look and try to gauge whether we know somebody is getting better or not getting better. We don't have access to that information. The other thing is we do have a number of individuals that have exceeded the $200,000, so we do get credits back after the fact. So there's a delay. We pay out the claim and then get the credit back. So that's what our brokers are analyzing now, and that's why the estimates, updating the estimates are not, they take time. So it's not something that we can get every time we pay. We're not able to update that to get an accurate projection for the following year. So the projection that we wait on for next year's budget is the amount that we have to budget so that we're covered with the stop-loss insurance. So that's what we're waiting on at this point. And then we won't actually know that real number till June, but because we have to submit a budget, we have to plan for the number that they give us now. And just to continue on with the health insurance, so since 2014-15, as most of you know that have been on the board for a while, we've saved $30 million that we've been able to put into capital reserve and use to make improvements to our buildings because we budget. So it's possible that we're going to budget at this number and our actual costs next year are going to come in here. So we won't spend that money if that's the case, but you have to budget just in case.
Thank you, Dana. I just want to highlight or emphasize something that Dr. Gonzalez and you said at the last meeting, but I just think it's relevant. And it's on the presentation. It was given last week and it's on the website, so it's available. But just one really interesting or one important financial fact is that Westfield spends $1,760 less per student than the average in New Jersey. We spend even less compared to our peer schools that are at the same academic kind of level. That comes out to about $10.3 million that we are not spending towards the education of our students. The other important kind of disparity is that your projection had said that if we had stayed at the same tax levy before the 2% cap law was passed, we were averaging about 4.9%, which would put our budget at $144 million today, and instead our budget is $107 million. And so we're spending $37 million less on our kids. So just to think of all the things we could be doing with that money, even if we go to the most modest amount, which is the 10.3 million, that we could be investing towards the education of our kids. So I just wanted to highlight that point, but thank you very much.
As well, which is sometimes over the years in town, people have questions about, well, why don't we save money and then apply it to a future budget? If we were able to save money from healthcare savings in the last few years, how do we find ourselves in this situation now? And I think the quick answer is there are an awful lot of rules and regulations about how we can spend our money.
Right.
And maybe just to sort of class that up just a little bit, Dana, just to explain a little bit more.
Sure. Well, yes, ideally, you'd be right. If we were taking those savings for those years, even putting a portion of them aside to help us in a year like this, that would make sense. However, we're not allowed to do that. So we do take advantage of any reserve. We're limited to a 2% unallocated reserve, which in our case is only $2 million. It's not that much on the budget of our size. That can be held in the reserve account. That's also where we get the money that we use the 750 from. It comes from that amount. We do take advantage of any reserve account we are allowed to use for health insurance. And that's an emergency reserve. We're already maxed out at that. And we also have a reserve that's called a corridor reserve, and we're maxed out at that as well, based on actuary estimates. So we do take advantage of reserve accounts as much as we can, but unfortunately, the state puts limits on us, and we can't exceed those.
$1 million that we've saved through health insurance has made it so we haven't had to bond for every single large maintenance project we've had to do. Back in 2012, when the voters voted down the roof renovations in all of our schools, the common thread that we heard a lot of was, you guys know that the roofs have a 30-year life, why haven't you been saving for it along the way? You heard them. We've been able to do that because of Dana's financial mastery of
Right, and
literally getting blood from the stone. I don't know how you do it sometimes.
And it's the self-insurance has been what's enabled us to do that, because we really wouldn't have been able to do that without that. So thankfully, we did do that, but some years, regardless, even if we were fully insured, the year that we're having would still affect us with our increase next year, because that's what they look at, is your claims and your experience. We're not alone in this, by the way. This is what I'm hearing from many other school districts, and I'm sure it's a factor of people not really going for physicals or diagnostic tests for, a year and a half, or whatever it is. So, which also means hopefully it's going to start leveling off and continue to level off.
So in both the scenarios, we're over cap, right?
Yes, correct.
Can you, because I'm not a financial person, so can you explain, how we might remedy that, in terms of the community and to let the
Well, so we're going to have to make reductions to the budget, and because the slide that we showed at the last board meeting, 83% of our budget is salaries and benefits, a large portion of those are going to come from reductions to staff. We are looking at places where we will have the least impact to the classroom. That's obviously not what we're trying to do. We're not trying to affect program or eliminate programs. So we will look at areas that will have the least impact to programs in school.
that play a role in,
So, no, so the way we get to the tax levy, to the cap, is the 2% cap on the tax levy. So the tax levy is going to increase 2%. We have no option with that. So that's why we're cutting. Otherwise, we'd be at higher than 2%.
Okay.
We'd be close to 6%.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? All right.
Just 2 points I want to reiterate, and as Dana had mentioned, in looking at how we could, how we're going to make up that difference, I think it, should be noted that, fidelity to our programs, existing programs and existing class sizes are our priority. So every decision that we're making is in discussion with administration and in discussion with this Board of Education and in consideration of that goal of trying to be the least disruptive to the student experience, and ultimately and unfortunately resulting in the same work that needs to be done, but less people to do it. So there's going to be an impact. We don't know what the final impact will be, hence the reason why we just wanted to provide the scenarios. But we did want to, commit that our focus is on ensuring the least disruption to our students as possible. And lastly, I did want to just conclude by highlighting that the presentation that we gave this evening is posted on the website, as we had mentioned, but it includes the prior week's presentation. So each week that we present on the budget, it will be added to the prior week's presentation so that you could see the progression of our budget development, starting with the historical background that we shared last meeting, bringing us to the point where we are today, and then ultimately refining our numbers at the March 15th presentation. So I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to that as well.
Any other questions, comments for Dana or Dr. Gonzalez on any of the presentations you saw so far? All right, moving right along to board committee reports.
Curriculum Committee met last Wednesday morning, February 16th. We reviewed revised curriculum for 2 social studies classes, which you will see on the agenda. 8th grade debate elective. It's a semester-long class at both of our intermediate schools, and a high school elective on the fundamental principles of economic and personal finance, which is also an elective and one of the ways that our high school students can achieve their financial literacy requirement through the state. We were able to hear from our social studies supervisor, Andrea Brennan, and 2 of the teachers who were involved with the classes, and that was really helpful. So those are not new classes, they're revisions, and the curriculum is on for first reading as curriculum item number 2 for voting. We also heard from Enrique Pinque, who's our supervisor of world languages, on a revision of all 4 levels of Mandarin Chinese, which is taught at the high school. Again, not new classes, but revision and improvements. We talked a little bit about that program, and that it is finally, after several years, has achieved students who are taking level 4 of Mandarin, which is pretty cool. He also took advantage of joining SIP to talk in a little bit more detail about the English Language Learners Program. There was an item on our agenda at our last meeting, sort of approving a submission to the state, which we do every 3 years, sort of sketching out what the program entails, and he was able to go into more information, more detail with us, which was helpful. And then we spoke with Dr. Pinero, sort of highlighting the presentation that he gave earlier, talking about the responsive classroom goal, the DEI goal, and where we stand with the health and PE goal. And again, those are items, we are not voting on any of those items tonight. They're not agenda action items. It was just a check-in and an update on where we stand. So we'll be hearing more about those items going forward. Our next meeting is March 18th in the morning. And just to reiterate, the action items for curriculum that we would take comment on at our first public comment period are approving a second reading of elementary mathematics, which we talked about at our last meeting. So this is the second reading of that curriculum. And then approving the first reading, the curriculum for the 2 social studies classes, the 8th grade debate and the principles of economic and personal finance, and the revised Mandarin curriculum. And then the third item that I'm asking for your approval on tonight are a list of student, teacher, and intern candidates for, it says this year, but it might be this year or next year, but more than one this time, so that's exciting. So those are the 3 actionable agenda items for curriculum this time. Do any of my, sorry, Kristen, you missed some of that. Oh, one of the things we did want to talk about was that we did have a couple people last week or at least one member of the public inquire about a Holocaust education program, and certainly since that is something that is a priority for us, we did talk a bit about that with Dr. Pinero and with Andrea Brennan, the social studies supervisor, and it was an interesting conversation about, do you look at it in terms of history, or do you look, or what other opportunities do we have elsewhere in the curriculum and in our programming to address that as a character education piece, so that's an ongoing conversation that we will have, but we were able to talk a little bit about, I think the member of the public who commented last time said that a couple of the districts around us are offering a course on that, and they are, Paul and I think the high school, and Andrea and the high school principal and staff are looking at how to offer an elective on the Holocaust at the high school level, but then what else can we be doing at different levels for age-appropriate instruction on those ideas and kind of teaching about human nature in general. So they're continuing to work through that, and so we'll hear more about that as we go. Does that sound right? Kristen, is there anything else you want to add about that? That sounds good? Okay. All right. And again, that's not anything we're voting on tonight, but I just want to give you that report from our curriculum meeting. Yeah.
Presentation showed the audit will look heavily across the board, kind of uniformly, at Jewish education and what type of information or experience is missing K through 12. Part of the AI audit.
That's my understanding as well. Yes. Yeah.
All of those, subclasses that you had listed, plus more, and we'll show if there are holes in the program and how to offer suggestions on rectifying them.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
Mike, do you have a facilities report for us?
Yes, I do. We had our facilities meeting earlier this afternoon, discussed a number of topics. One was the Elm Street field, and having the Westfield Soccer Association using that field. They're still in discussions with using it. They have to look at the water line. One of the things they did state, though, is we will not impact the Westfield Y tree sale in any way. So that's still ongoing discussions, and as we get additional progress, I will report it out. Edison Fields project, we're still waiting to hear back on the town on proceeding that. They're waiting for a couple of reports to come in, or they've come in and they haven't given us the analysis yet. So once the town provides us an update, then we can provide an update. We just don't have any additional information at this time. There's a project for painting the fence at Lincoln School. I actually saw a couple of pictures. They're going to paint the fence in very fun colors. There's a Disney designer who I assume lives in town that's been involved in the project. They're going to paint it all different fun colors, so it really should be nice for the kids to play in, surrounding the playground area. And then we looked into the summer 2022 projects, which includes the HVAC project. Next phase, the courtyard renovations, phase 2 at the high school. We have the Dr. Nelson Memorial that we did the first phase, which was complete, which is really functional. Once everything's up and running, we hit spring, we'll have tables out there where the kids can sit out there. And the second phase involves more of a rain garden and putting down pavers to make it more pretty. And then finally is the Franklin roof renovation, which we have to go. It ran out of its life cycle, and we have to go and look. There's some issues and basically maintenance to ensure that we don't have any further leaks, and looking to replace that roof. Our next meeting is scheduled, I believe it's April 5th. We'll provide an update after that meeting. That's all. Thank you.
Questions for Mike? All right. Amy, finance.
Finance, yep. The Finance Committee met last Tuesday afternoon, and Dana's already gone over a lot of what we talked about at our finance meeting, but just to kind of recap really briefly, we did talk about the health benefits, where things stand, where we're likely to see some changes and how that will affect our premium estimates for next year, which affects the overall budget. Also, fund balance projections, there's a lot of rules, as we alluded to, about how money is transferred back and forth from one account to another. Those are items that you'll see on the finance agenda that we vote on pretty regularly. Transportation we covered. That continues to be quite a challenge. Nationwide bus shortage, costs going up. But we keep trying, we keep swimming. Yeah, the change in meeting dates as a result of the change in state aid. Those are really the highlights of the meeting. And then we will have our next our next finance meeting is Tuesday, March 8th. So we can discuss what the governor announces and what we're likely to hear on March 10th moving forward. So again, just to kind of recap, there's a lot of budgetary transfers that we're voting on the finance portion of the agenda tonight. We're accepting some very generous gifts from different constituencies in the community, and we'll talk about those when we get to the agenda. So that's pretty much it. Any questions? No? Okay. Oh, yes.
Yeah, no, yeah, you or me, I don't care. There was a question in the audience last meeting about grants. It came up in connection with some of the technology that we were doing upgrades on. So it was something that we discussed at our finance committee as well. And Dana was able to provide a little bit of information on how that grant process works. The long story short is the district's always looking to find ways to enhance its finances by way of grants, but there is A, a limited number of grants that go to public schools, and B, when we apply for many of those grants, they typically tend to go to districts that are far more needy than Westfield. So we asked about, does it make sense to have a grant officer? It seems that the cost of that salary would outweigh the benefit of getting in the grants just because of the nature of our district, where they are, the requirements that get set for those grants. But one of the possibilities that we discussed is private grants. If you're a parent who works for a particular company, they may have some grants that could be applied to school systems. So the action item that will come out of that is if there are parents who work for companies that may have grants available to schools, definitely reach out. I think I'm going to put you on the spot, but that's okay. Everybody else does, right? So definitely please reach out to Dana, because we may be able to at least apply for those grants, if they are available. But just as a general matter, it's not that it hasn't been looked at. This was something that's done over years of attempts, and we're just finding that we tend to miss out on some of those. But if there are private grants to look at, please let Dana know, and let's see if we can make something happen with them. But thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Rob, for bringing that up. Let's see. Long-range planning. We are meeting for the first time this calendar year on the 15th of March. And policies will be meeting on March 7th. So I have no reports for either of those committees at this time. If there's no other comments on committee reports, we'll open up the public comment. During this portion of the meeting, district residents and staff are invited to address the Board of Education on agenda action items only. This is items number 9A, 9B, 9C, and 9D on the agenda. And the reason we have this section is so that we can hear from you before we take a formal vote on specific agenda items. The board requests that individuals state their name and address for the record, the specific action items they are commenting on, and ask that all remarks be directed to the board president or designee, not to individual board members or staff. The board asks that members of the public be courteous and mindful of the rights of other individuals when speaking. Specifically, comments regarding personnel matters are discouraged and cannot be responded to by the board. Students and employees have specific legal rights afforded by the laws of New Jersey. The board bears no responsibility, nor will it be liable for any comments made by members of the public. If a matter concerning a district staff member is of interest or concern to a resident, the matter should be referred to the responsible building principal, the superintendent of schools, or the Board of Education, either by telephone, letter, or email. Although the board may not respond to items raised during the public forum, all public comments will be considered. Please note that if any member of the public becomes disruptive during the meeting, the board president may terminate the participant statement. Continued disruptions may result in removal from the meeting or adjournment of the meeting. Each speaker's comment will be limited to 3 minutes in duration. If you'd like to make comments at this time, please line up along that side of the room.
Lisa Esposito, 234 Golf Edge Drive. So I just wanted to say that I was disappointed in the tone of the email that was sent this morning by Dr. Gonzalez and the board president. Words like disorderly conduct, adjourn the meeting at any time.
This is not an action item.
I'm talking about the overall agenda and just how we've been interacting with the board.
You'll have to hold that comment till the second
Adjourn
comment section.
the meeting at any time. The
Ma'am, you'll have to hold
public does not accept
this comment till the
removal.
second public comment session. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Ma'am, you're done. Officer,
You can speak.
you can speak in 5 minutes. Just let us vote. Anybody else want to comment on agenda action items?
Was what Dr. Gonzalez went through, was that one of the agenda items? or
The presentations? No.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. All right. All right, I ask the board to approve. Oh, wait, no, we have one more. Thank you.
All right, before I start speaking, I just want to make sure this was an actionable item. It's 9D, right?
Yes.
For the curriculum. I wanted to just,
Name and address.
oh, sorry, Lori McCormick, 917 Tice Place. I'm extremely concerned about the curriculum that was, I understand it's coming from the state on the sexual education and
We're not voting on sex
okay, that's what
curriculums.
that's not one of the curriculum, okay.
Nope.
I thought that was-
Curriculum items are elementary mathematics, Mandarin, Chinese 1 through 4,
Okay.
and principles
I'm
of
sorry.
finance
I
and
will
debate.
wait till another time.
Thank you. All right. Moving on. I ask the board to approve the minutes from the February 8th, 2022 meeting and the executive session minutes attached. Have a second? Thank you, Amy. Dana? Aye.
Any abstentions?
All right, thank you. I ask the board to approve governance item 1. This is to affirm the superintendent's decision, HIB incident 22 MC02 for the reasons set forth therein. Thank you, Leila. There's no debate, so.
Sahar Aziz?
Yes.
Rob Bonaccio?
Yes.
Mike Beelan?
Yes.
Brenda Galligan?
Yes.
Leila Morelli? Amy Root? Kristen Sonic-Schmelz? Mary Wickens?
Thank you. I ask the board to approve personnel items number 1 through 12. Can I have a second? Thank you, Kristen. Dr. Gonzalez, do you have any retirements you'd like to speak to?
Yes. Tonight, I'm announcing with regret the retirements of 3 staff members who have given a total of 87 years of service to Westfield students. Barbara Banansky began her career in Westfield as a secretary at the high school in 1990, where she assisted in the health office and also in the main office as the bookkeeper. While she spent time at Elm Street in the business office and also in human resources, Barbara was delighted to return to the high school to finish her career in the health office. She has been adaptable and able to facilitate the daily operation of a very busy office, and her nurturing and caring personality has made her an excellent fit. For the last 27 years, Greg Long has been a special education teacher and valued member of the Roosevelt staff. In his resource room classes, he has customized the learning for his students, differentiating instruction to help each of them succeed. In his work as an in-class support teacher, he has partnered effectively with his colleagues in language arts and in math, aiding his students to connect with the subject matter. In addition, Greg has supported the Roosevelt community by serving as the head of the building's leadership team, as a basic skills tutor both before and after school, and by being the school's treasurer for many years. In 1993, Honora Conway started teaching in the art department at Westfield High School, and she has happily stayed there for the length of her career. She has taught a variety of areas within the department, including drawing and composition, art history, and advanced portfolio. An accomplished artist herself, Honora has helped students discover a love and appreciation for art. Her classroom is a place for students to express their individuality and develop their creativity. With her support and encouragement, her students have loved being a part of the town's Adams Fest contest and the downtown Halloween parade murals. We wish Barbara, Greg, and Honora healthy and happy retirements.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez. Any questions or comments from board members? All right, Dana?
Sahar Aziz.
Yes.
Rob Bonaccio.
Yes.
Mike Phelan. Brendan Galligan.
Yes.
Layla Morelli. Amy Root. Kristen Sonic-Smelt. Mary Wickens.
Thank you. Amy?
Facilities, I would like the board to consider finance items 1 through 15. Could I have a second, please? Thank you, Layla. Would just like to call out a couple items specifically. We'd like to, number 10 is to accept a donation of $100 from Mr. Kenneth L. McRitchie to fund the 2022 Walton Burris Music and Ian McRitchie Information Technology Award. Item 11 is to accept a donation of 6 high-quality furniture stools valued at $1,139.94 from the Westfield Coalition for the Arts for the Westfield High School Orchestra's double bass players. I had a double bass player. I'm sure the current ones will be very happy to have a nice place to sit. Number 12 is to accept a donation of $10,583.67 from the Franklin Elementary School PTO to fund repair work for Franklin Elementary School's current playground equipment. I liaise with that PTO. I was privy to their conversations about how to help and how to extend the life of what they currently have. So we're very grateful for that donation. The last one, number 13, is to accept a donation of $419 from the Westfield High School PTSO to purchase a chair, which will be awarded to a teacher at Senior Awards Night this spring. Grateful for the support of these organizations, which allow us to expand on the offerings that we can provide in our schools. If there are any other questions or comments from board members? Nope. Okay. Dana?
Sahar Aziz. Rob Bonaccio.
Yes.
Mike Phelan.
Yes.
Brendan Galligan.
Yes.
Layla Morelli. Amy Root. Kristen Sonic-Smelt. Mary Wickens.
Amy, and Kristen.
Items 1 through 3. Could I have a second, please? Thanks, Kristen. Okay. Again, as we said earlier, item number 1 is to approve second reading of the curriculum for elementary mathematics. Item number 2 is to approve first reading for 2 social studies classes, the 8th grade advanced debate, the high school fundamental principles of economic and personal finance, and the revised Mandarin 1 through 4. And then number 3, I double-checked, of course, the dates are correct, the list of intern and student teacher candidates for the remainder of the 2021-2022 school year as attached. Any questions or comments from board members? Nope. Okay.
Sahar Aziz.
Yes.
Rob Bonaccio.
Yes.
Mike Phelan.
Yes.
Brendan Galligan. Layla Morelli. Amy Root. Kristen Sonic-Schmeltz. Mary Wickens.
Thank you. I ask the board to receive the minutes for the record. Thank you. Any unfinished business? Any new business? Liaison reports. All right. No liaison reports. Now I'm going to open the public comment session. During this portion of the meeting, members of the public are invited to address the Board of Education on any topic. I ask anybody that's wishing to speak to please line up along that wall. The Board of Education requests that individuals state their name and address for the record and asks that all remarks be directed to the board president or designee, not to individual board members or staff. The board asks that members of the public be courteous and mindful of the rights of others when speaking. Specifically, comments regarding personnel matters are discouraged and cannot be responded to by the board. Students and employees have specific legal rights afforded by the laws of New Jersey. The board bears no responsibility nor will be liable for any comments made by members of the public. If a matter concerning a district staff member is of interest or concern to a resident, the matter should be referred to the responsible building principal, the superintendent of schools, or the Board of Education, either by telephone, letter, or email. Although the board may not respond to all items raised during the public forum, all public comments will be considered. Please note that if any member of the public becomes disruptive during the meeting, the board president may terminate that participant statement. Continued disruptions may result in removal from the meeting or adjournment of the meeting. Each speaker's statement will be limited to 3 minutes in duration. Thank you.
Emily Barker, 434 Longfellow. I'd like to thank whoever put the agenda together for including such helpful links to the New Jersey State suggested lesson plans for the new sex ed curriculum. They were very well embedded, but I did find them. There are some questionable topics and themes. I know not every district will use these exact lesson plans, but I'll use my time to highlight some of the topics specifically for the lower grades. Again, this is New Jersey state lesson plans, not federal. So first grade, pink, purple, and blue as a topic. The learning objectives: define gender, gender identity, and gender role stereotypes. Grade 2, understanding our bodies. Learning objectives: correctly identify at least 4 body parts of the female genitals. Correctly identify at least 4 body parts of the male genitals. Then it goes on, display on the 3rd slide, tell the class that you need their help to review. Ask for 6 volunteers and at one time give each volunteer a post-it note with one of the following words on them. 2nd grade, clitoris, urethra, vulva, vagina, anus, nipples, penis, scrotum, testicles. Again, 2nd grade. Okay? 4th grade, what is love anyway? Define sexual orientation. Demonstrate that they have a trusted adult with whom they can speak about sexual orientation among other sexually related topics. This should be we're going to encourage you children to speak to your parents, not just any adults. It should be speak to your parents. Grade 5, thinking outside the gender box. Sex assigned at birth, gender identity, cisgender, transgender, gender non-binary, and transgender. Differentiate between a person's gender identity and gender expression. And also, grade 5, explain what puberty blocker medications are and the role that they play with transgender young people. Now, my purpose in pointing this all out is not to say that they are inappropriate topics to be discussed with children. My point is that these are sensitive topics that should be left to the parents to decide when their children are mature enough to handle the teaching of these topics in detail, especially at the elementary school level. This is not the job of the schools, and it never should be. It is our children, our parents, the parents of our children should decide.
Hi, my name is Kyle Binder. I live at 404 West Dudley Avenue. Thank you for letting me speak tonight. I am a 5th grade student at Franklin School, and I'm here tonight because I'm really hoping that masks can come off on March 7th. Truthfully, masks are very uncomfortable and they are very hard for me to breathe in. In school, we have to wear a mask for 6 hours a day and stay on dots away from our friends when we eat. It's not fun anymore. How how come other schools get to have masks optional, but ours doesn't? Wearing masks are very distracting, and it's hard to concentrate with them on. I wish school could be the way it used to be, with masks, because I miss seeing my friends a lot. I think us kids have been really good about this, so adults don't have to wear them anymore. So why do we? Please make masks optional on March 7th for us kids. Thank you.
My name is Christine Bender, 404 West Dudley Avenue. Last week when I came, or 2 weeks ago when I came back from the Board of Ed meeting, every time I come back from the Board of Ed meeting, my son says, any word, Mom? Do we get to take the masks off? And I feel encouraged that they're going to come off March 7th, but he came to me and he said, maybe if they hear from us, Mom, maybe if they hear from us kids, really hear from us, maybe we'll do better than the parents do. And I said, you know what, Kyle, go for it. So he came, he spoke, I'm proud of him, and I just hope again that they are made optional for people and, for these poor kids. So thank you. I also wanted to say thank you to Rob Bonaccio for mentioning about the transparency. I think it's important. I think the same way you and we all deserve respect. I think it's a two-way street. I honestly think that whole pizza incident, I think people were just hungry. We were here for 4 hours. There were little kids here. I don't think there was any ill intent. That's just what my perception of it was. I think being different circumstances, maybe we could have just ate, in private, but for whatever it turned into, it's like, it wasn't about the pizza. It's just about people, we just want to have a dialogue. I don't think it's a lot to ask for. People could say what they want about Dr. Dolan. She gave me a one-on-one half-hour meeting in 2020 about the masks. And I think that's just really all we want. We just want a dialogue. I mean, I don't appreciate when I come up here and talk and I see people sitting reading a book. I don't think that's respectful. Right? I mean, don't we kind of want the same thing? So I appreciate you saying that, Rob, because I think there's such a division between the board and a lot of the parents now, and it's unfortunate. I never realized how important the board was. I didn't realize that I'd have to actually be meeting realtors in other states because I'm waiting to hear what the board says. I mean, that's pretty powerful position. And I think we just, want to be listened to, taken seriously, and I don't know. I don't get that vibe from some of you, and it's just disheartening. Thank you.
Hello, Justin Lubino, 19 Cornwall Drive. First of all, I want to thank you for what I think was a positive update regarding March 7th and making masks optional. This is an exciting milestone. With regards to the exceptions you're waiting for additional guidance on, I am a bit concerned about what exceptions will be created. Any exceptions will create additional burden on students, teachers, and administrators to manage these exceptional scenarios, which takes away from the time that they can spend focusing, catching up on the educational milestones that we're behind on. If you're going to have any exceptions, I implore you, please do not just blindly accept guidance from the health experts. If you're going to have any exceptions, please have good data that defends those exceptions. One thing we've learned in the last couple of years is that our health leaders have been wrong, unfortunately, again and again, with wear a mask, or don't wear a mask, wear two masks, wear one mask. If you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask. Oh wait, you do have to wear a mask. Spray your Amazon boxes with disinfectant. Wash your hands 15 times a day. Use Purell. Oh wait, it's an airborne virus. The coronavirus that originated in Wuhan couldn't have come from the lab in Wuhan. It was probably from a wet market. Oh wait, maybe it did come from the lab. The lockdowns will prevent the spread and will be good for everyone. Oh wait, the lockdowns created more harm than good. Look, the list goes on and on. Many people will defend these leaders because they're dealing with an unprecedented situation. I'm not here to debate the capabilities of these health leaders, but it's important we stop blindly accepting the recommendations without any real data that defends the recommendations. As the leader responsible for this decision, it's no longer okay to make an arbitrary decision because the health leader told me to do so. It's imperative we have and share any real data with all of us. So if there's going to be an exception, what data is defending that exception for this mask optional rule? We talked about transparency earlier, and we need that transparency with this data. So if we're going to have any sort of exception, please share the information that's defending that. That's all I have. Thank you for your time.
Good evening. My name is Wael Rashid. I'm the president of the Islamic Center of Union County. I represent the Muslims in Westfield and Union County. The love we have for our community, the love we have for our children, that's what brought us here today. And I admire the presentation, I admire the talk about DE&I. And I'm very, very proud of Westfield community for electing Professor Sahar Aziz to represent the whole diversity in Westfield, their students and their parents. Dr. Aziz is the first elected American female Muslims in Board of Education, and we are very proud of her. She has proven record of great work in her field. And to me, as I get to know her, she's a fountain or bank of knowledge on the presentation was presented earlier on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and human nature topics in general, and an asset for community engagement and opportunities for us to communicate. And we, as a Muslim in Union County and Westfield, we support her 100%. She belonged to this Board of Ed. Who are we as Muslim in Westfield? We are very diverse. We are educators, we're doctors, we're lawyers, we're business owners, we're members of the interfaith, we're members of the MLK, we are members of Black Lives Matter, and also Jewish Voice for Peace. We're very diverse. Although Westfield does not have a mosque, but Union County by itself, it has dozens of mosques, a dozen of mosques. Today, tomorrow, and every day, we'll be here to support our beloved Professor Sahar Aziz and all the elected officials. If they call on us, we're here for you to support you and help you. I heard about the grants, I heard about opportunities. The Muslim community can help. We are here for you. And we're here to help build the better education, safety environment for all the diverse people in Union County and all the minority. The reason I'm speaking today, and I want the board to take...
Time's up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Zelly Thomas, 332 Crooks Ave, Patterson, New Jersey. Good evening, my name is Zelly Thomas. I'm an educator, an organizer for Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter stands in support of board member Dr. Sahar Aziz. As a black man living in America, I know racism, I know colonialism, I know oppression. As a child during Black History Month, learning about chattel slavery, Jim Crow, I will always wonder, like I assume many of your students wonder as well, what would I do or what would I have done if I lived during those times? Would I risk my livelihood or even my life to stand up for what was wrong, even though it was accepted in those times? As a Black Lives Matter organizer who has had guns pointed at him, slurs thrown at him, and his job threatened, I know the answer, and I'm still fighting. Chattel slavery and Jim Crow was abolished not because people were silent, but because people were vocal and risked their livelihoods, and tragically some, black and white, lost their lives to improve the lives of others. A tool of oppression is to silence those that want to end oppression, but silence is not peace. Only the absence of oppression is peace. If we want peace for our students and peace for humanity, we need to stop oppression, not to stop people from talking about it. What my people have experienced and continue to experience, I want no one else to experience. That's why I loudly and boldly say Black Lives Matter and Free Palestine, and I hope that everyone can echo those same words with me. Thank you for your time.
Hello, I'm Tova Fry, and I speak as a member of Jewish Voice for Peace, with over 500,000 online supporters in 85 chapters nationwide, who say that being Jewish and Judaism is not synonymous with Zionism or support for Israel. In fact, we agree with Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and B'Tselem that Israel is an apartheid state. I'm here in defense of Westfield Board of Education Vice President and Rutgers Professor Zahar Aziz, who has been under vicious attack by hateful Zionist forces for having retweeted a post with the phrase, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," which CARE New Jersey describes as a, quote, invitation for Palestinians and Jews to imagine themselves as free and equal in this land, unquote. And it's a phrase which I've repeated myself countless times over many years. There's absolutely nothing anti-Semitic about this, and Professor Aziz has every right to her free speech. My own family history and existence challenges the entire Zionist narrative. All four of my grandparents and 10 of my aunts and uncles were killed in Nazi concentration camps before I was even born. My family tried to come to the U.S. after the war, but were denied visas due to U.S. quotas against Eastern European Jews. Now that was anti-Semitism. In 1949, with few choices, they wound up penniless in what had been declared Israel. Some Israeli soldiers stole the home of a Palestinian family, gave it to my parents, and that's where I was born. Our very Jewish history of fighting against discrimination and oppression of Jews and against discrimination and oppression of all kinds doesn't fit the dystopian world of Israeli Zionism, where Palestinians are ruled by a different set of laws, courts, and prisons than Jews, who occupy ever-increasing areas of land by expropriating the homes, land, and villages of the Palestinian people. In reaction to the Holocaust, countless Jews have followed the false flag of Zionism based on an ideal of building a Jewish state. But the land had people and has a people, Palestinians, from whom the Zionists have stolen homes and land, and whom they have expelled, walled off, and closed off from their own fields, and with separate roads for the Israeli settlers. Gaza is an open-air prison where residents must apply to leave, even for medical care and education. Jews worldwide are invited to emigrate to occupied Palestine, while the Palestinian diaspora is not allowed to return to land which was stolen from them. Thank you.
Kyle George, Short Hills Court. I didn't know we were inviting the Rutgers Fan Club here tonight to speak on behalf of the board VP. From the river to the sea is absolutely anti-Semitic. Mr. Israelo said it at the recent forum in Westfield, so I don't know where that fact is coming from or attempted fact. Mr. Galligan, at the last BOE meeting, parents spoke about the BOE VP's tweeting, which frequently contain anti-Israel articles, including ones that say Israel is an apartheid state, allege crimes against humanity, and even attempt at redefining that phrase from the river to the sea. In a February 9th Tap Into News article after the last BOE meeting, the VP was quoted as saying, quote, "Whatever it is I tweet or retweet, there is no nexus to the Board of Education's business. There is no nexus to what my role is on the board. It's really just a cover to engage in an ad hominem attack. And it's just a personal smear as opposed to something that is really directed to my role on the board." End quote. Oh, really? No nexus. Not directly related. Allow me to challenge that for a minute. On February 10th, even after parents raised the tweet issue, the BOE VP tweeted again on her own, not a retweet, a link to droptheadl.org. The ADL meaning Anti-Defamation League, with the link text, quote, "The ADL is not an ally to our movements," end quote. How is this not nexus? The ADL is the district's official partner for No Place for Hate. And the VP sits on committees like the curriculum committee that are tasked with directly addressing the rampant anti-Semitism in our schools via the curriculum. Since I've received no response from Dr. Gonzalez or the BOE, I assume that we're now moving to drop the ADL since Mrs. Eves is the only one communicating. This is not an ad hominem attack. It is a 100% legitimate concern. Remember, Westfield High School has had repeated anti-Semitism, including swastikas. How disrespectful is it towards me, a concerned Jewish parent, to not receive a response and be publicly dismissed by the BOE? I want to say a few words about masks. I'm pleased to hear that we're moving in the direction of making masks optional, but there's still a lot of uncertainty. We need leadership. Today I asked my 8 and 6-year-old daughters a simple question of, quote, "How do you feel about masks? Write it down for me, please." We've never been an anti-mask household because we didn't want to undermine what was necessary for school to be open. My 6-year-old wrote that she isn't sure. After all, she's always worn them as far as she knows. My 8-year-old wrote this letter, which I'm going to read and give to you. Dear Board of Ed, how I feel about masks is that they are ready to go. My first reason is that we've had them for too long and that they are ready to go. We should be able to breathe fresh air, and it will keep us from getting really sweaty. And with the mask gone, we can hear our teachers more clearly. Thanks for reading this letter. Please make masks optional. Love, Rachel.
Oh, sorry. First, let me start by saying Assalamu alaikum. Peace and blessings be with you. My name is Salahuddin Mustafa. I am from the Islamic Center of Union County. My family lives in the city of Union. This is a pretty interesting day when we hear from comments that denigrate a really good person. One of the things that I definitely want to make sure people understand, that there is a reason to criticize Israel. As a Palestinian, there's a reason to criticize Israel. Let me give you a few examples, some contrasts. We hear all the time that Israel has the same values as we do. Really? They have the same values as we do? So why is it that if a 12-year-old Palestinian child throws a rock, the Israeli army invades his home and sends him to a military trial? But if an Israeli settler sets a house on fire with the parents and family inside and they get killed, he gets a civil trial. So these are the reasons that we criticize, and these are the reasons that our people need to understand that there's more to the story than every time we criticize it, they come up with this excuse of anti-Semitism. Shame on them. Anti-Semitism is real, and we as Muslims want to be in the fight against anti-Semitism because it comes from the same root that is Islamophobic. So shame on them for distracting the real truth of anti-Semitism, which happens in this school. We know it happens in this school, but that has nothing to do with the criticism of Israel. We have a right to criticize Israel. She should not be discriminated against for her free speech rights. That's what this country is about. We get criticized if we get criticized and called anti-Semitic if we criticize the Israeli Prime Minister, but we don't get criticized if we make comments about the President of the United States. Think about that. That is trying to silence free speech. This Board of Education should be teaching the children that the most important right that they have is the right to free speech, not to silence people for expressing a legitimate view that she has or that we have. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is David Letwin. I'm at 17 Walnut Court in South Orange, New Jersey. As a Jew and as a New Jersey citizen, as a descendant of victims of both the Nazi Holocaust and pogroms in Tsarist Russia, and as a co-founder of Jews for Palestinian Right of Return, I unhesitatingly support and applaud Vice President Aziz for sharing a tweet to the effect that the phrase "from the river to the sea" is not in any way anti-Semitic. Contrary to what some have alleged, this phrase is in fact a call for justice and liberation from the apartheid Israeli regime, not an expression of animus towards Jewish people. In this country, we are witnessing not only a resurgence of white supremacist anti-Semitism, but a concerted effort by supporters of apartheid Israel to silence advocates of Palestinian rights, including growing numbers of Jews, by smearing them as anti-Semitic. I understand the Westfield BOE affirmed that Professor Aziz violated no state law or board bylaw in posting her tweet. But moving forward, I also hope the board will have the courage to stand up to this campaign of disinformation and slander and defend on principle the right of anyone in the Westfield community to advocate freely for justice and equality in Palestine from the river to the sea. Thank you, Professor Aziz.
Hello, good evening. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Salahuddin Maksud, 77 Colonial Road, Wayne, New Jersey. Thank you. I'll keep it brief. Last year, Clifton Board of Education members were accused of anti-Semitism for speaking in support of the Palestinian community. Because they were accused of anti-Semitism, the issue went to the School Ethics Commission. The School Ethics Commission just last month issued a motion to dismiss the claims, the ethics claims against the two Board of Education members, because the commission knows what you all already know, that pro-Palestinian opinions are not equal to anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is a vile, disgusting form of racism that should be shut out at every opportunity given. But pro-Palestinian opinions and stances are not that. You all already know this because many of you have already commented about this in last month. It's in a few of the articles. So I'm already telling you what you already know. Nothing here is new. I just want to express my support for the professor and for the township. And I want to also applaud you all on your efforts in the diversity and inclusion goals that you have set. I think it's very important that our curriculum reflects this and continues to take effort to combat all forms of racism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and other forms of hatred on the basis of race, religion, gender, sexuality, etc. Thank you for your time. Have a good night.
Assalamualaikum. So my name is Dean Chaban, and I'd like to start off this with whoever left that door right now, can you tell them please not to come back? because they're gonna just go up into the streets. And I'm not saying that I don't agree with Black Lives Matter, but they're gonna raise these signs, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter. But once he says that the word Palestine, they already turned their backs on out with it. Like, how is that fair in any case? Like, they're talking about racism, and they're just doing it right now. Like, they're saying, racism is bad, we should stop it. Jim Crow, we should stop it. Segregation is bad. And they're just walking out the door because she said that that Israel is an apartheid state and Palestine should be free. And like, there's so much evidence supporting that Palestine is being mistreated and basically bullied by the Israelis. So that's all I have to say.
Hi, I'm Jean Limber. I live at 528 Grove Street, and I'm here to talk about the Edison Fields, a little bit of a change of topic. According to the Department of Education website, the 2020 New Jersey Student Learning Standards represent a foundation from which districts will build coherent curriculum and instruction that prepares each New Jersey student with the knowledge and skills to succeed in our rapidly changing world. They will put New Jersey again at the forefront of national education by including the following: climate change across all content areas, leveraging the passion students have shown for this critical issue and providing them opportunities to develop a deep understanding of the science behind the changes and to explore the solutions our world desperately needs. The Westfield curriculum already includes units on Earth systems, weather, pollution control, and other aspects of Earth and environmental sciences. Social studies students in grades 2 through 5 are asked to think critically by considering essential questions such as, how can people be responsible citizens in taking care of our environment? How does society make responsible decisions about how to use the world's limited resources? What are the costs and benefits of people adapting the environment to meet their needs? It is unfortunate that the adults who were trying to solve Westfield's shortage of playable athletic fields did not have the benefit of receiving climate change education. Perhaps if they had, they would not be asking all of you to allow them to rip up countless acres of natural grass ecosystems at Edison School and replace it with plastic carpeting, which will add to the climate change crisis, not mitigate it. The amount of plastic used to construct one synthetic turf field is equal to several million single-use plastic bags. Does it make sense to install any new artificial turf fields on Board of Education properties or anywhere in Westfield when single-use plastic bags will no longer be available in New Jersey starting on May 4th? The Edison Field project is projected to cost $9 million. Does it make sense to spend $9 million to enable a few hundred travel team athletes to practice on 2 artificial turf fields? Or would that money be better spent on upgrading Edison School and every Board of Education property with organically maintained natural grass athletic fields, which would benefit all of the nearly 6,000 students who currently attend Westfield schools? I hope that you will set a good example for our students and make decisions in keeping with the school district's tradition of environmental stewardship and the climate change education that all New Jersey students are required to receive. Thank you very much.
Okay, now's my time, right? And just a suggestion, it might be helpful when you have the attachments where it says 9A, B, C, D, to put on the link the title, like math curriculum, because that's, I was trying to go through that before I came up and I just didn't have the time to finish going through it. So anyway, Lori McCormick, 917 Tice Place. So I understand, I want to talk about the sex ed standards that are coming from the state. As I said before, I understand they're coming from the state, but as a teacher, I also understand that a school district can determine how they want to meet those standards and to what extent they want to go. My concern is with the resources that were shown to us on the slideshow that Dr. Pinera had talked about and chose to highlight tonight. The content and delivery of those resources is very, very concerning. I was not going to read some of the quotes because there were children here at the age that they suggest to actually teach this information, but some of the actual quotes, and this is direct from some of those resources. The vagina has great elasticity and can adjust to the size of a penis or allow a full developed fetus to pass. Clitoris, highly sensitive, vulva, scrotum, testicles producing sperm. This is suggested, and it actually said ideally for first grade. First grade. I think as a parent, any of you can understand why I'm concerned, and many people that I've spoken to about this are concerned about a first grader learning, even second grader, third grader, fourth grader. This is not appropriate information, language, or content. The detail is unnecessary and not anything I would want my child to learn at that age. So I do encourage everybody, anyone listening at home, to actually look at that slideshow and look at those links and look at what the state is putting down onto the district. And again, the district can determine how they want to deliver that information and to what extent they want to go. Bottom line, I don't understand how these resources could ever been presented or suggested, and I urge you to rethink them. It's not what's best for our children. And you did mention being able to pull your child. I hope these do not come to fruition or be used at all, but if it does make it through, I will be pulling my child, and I know that a lot of parents will do so as well. Because at the end of the day, parents are the only ones who should be talking to their children about these topics, and the only ones choosing when their children are ready to do so. Thank you.
Jim Fitzpatrick, 267 Woodland Avenue. One of the mantras that we've come to know so well during this pandemic is follow the data. That we've all heard that way too many times, but I think it's time that we actually follow the data in Westfield schools. The pandemic is going on almost 2 years now, and we do have sufficient data. If you look at the mortality rates for children under the age of 17, it's 0.008%, and that includes mortality of children that have sadly died with COVID and not because of COVID. So as we move towards a decision on mask choice, I hope that we follow that data. I hope that we can make an accurate assessment of risk for our children. I hope that we can do so without any type of exemptions or exclusions, regardless of vaccine status, etc. I'm encouraged by the earlier comments by Superintendent Gonzalez, and I hope we continue to march down that path of actually following the data. Thank you very much.
Let me close. Seeing no other comments, public comment is now closed. Dr. Gonzalez, would you like to respond to anything specifically?
Sure. I just wanted to reiterate a few of the points that were raised, but also that I had mentioned during my initial report, and that's with regards to the decision for masks. As mentioned in the beginning of the meeting, March 7th marks the date in which the governor's universal mask mandate will be lifted, and I fully anticipate that at that time we will be able to maintain a mask optional policy, as I mentioned, What I don't have are those instances where it would still be required. As alluded to, we have some instances already identified in school buses, and there may be other instances as well. So at this point, I do foresee, by and large, the masks becoming an optional decision to be made by students, their families, as well as our staff, recognizing, as someone had indicated, that there may be a need for an additional management on the part of the classroom teachers and the administrators based upon whatever guidance may come out. But we are looking closely at that and certainly look forward to sharing the details as it becomes available, hopefully by mid to early next week. In addition, I did want to also highlight there were concerns raised regarding the comprehensive health and physical education curriculum that includes units on growth and development and human sexuality. And as Dr. Pinero had presented, and as we prepared for this evening, we wanted to include the standards, we want to include the resources to the members of the community so that you are aware of the resources that we are reviewing. It does not mean, as the most recent speaker had mentioned, that we are required to use all of the sample lesson plans. And certainly we do have the discretion on how we achieve those content standards, and certainly take into account the concerns and the discretion that the district has in order to make sure that we are comfortable in the delivery of our curriculum. Moving forward in the coming months ahead, we do look forward to providing more detailed presentation of what our curriculum would look like, and being able to ensure that our parents have the ability to see that so that they can make informed decisions if they choose to exercise that option to opt out of those portions of the curriculum. So we want to make sure that our parents are comfortable in knowing what their children will be taught, and then can make an informed decision accordingly. So I did want to reiterate those points of the presentation this evening.
So I just want to make some comments for the record. I was somewhat surprised, but also delighted and thrilled to have been elected to the Westfield Board of Education. I am the first non-white person to be elected to the Board of Education, along with Sonal Patel. I'm the first Muslim to be elected to the Westfield Board of Education, and I'm the first Arab, and I'm the first Muslim Arab woman. And unfortunately, I'm experiencing what a lot of firsts experience when they are first, and especially when they're minorities, and when it intersects with gender. In the first in-person meeting we had in August, after 1 year, I guess it was 8 months at that point, of my tenure being online, I was called disgusting. I was called that woman, in that tone of voice pointing. When I spoke, and when some of my colleagues spoke that were women, we had men shouting over us and not even allowing us to talk, even though we were the board. I had an email sent to me by a gentleman at Westfield that said, I'm going to make it my goal to remove you from the Westfield Board of Education, and this was within the first couple months. That same individual has been spearing me across the Facebook post saying that I'm a Hamas supporter, which is a designated terrorist group. And last meeting, out of the blue, I was accused of being anti-Semitic for retweets on my personal account as a professor, as an expert on the Middle East, on issues related to foreign policy that have absolutely nothing to do with the Board of Education. And the individuals who spearheaded that, uncoincidentally, were the same ones who had expressed their desire to remove me from the board. They were also individuals who had lost the election. And people should respond, people respond differently when they lose elections. But it does certainly give you some insight into the motivations. They also tend to be the same individuals who are who have gone on the record to be against DEI and who have criticized me and accused me of being a critical race theorist, as if that is an insult. It is not an insult. I am a critical race theorist as a law professor. I don't teach in Westfield school districts. So, but that somehow is a crime. So another basis for them wanting to remove me. And another basis for essentially engaging in Islamophobia, which happens to be what I studied, ironically. But here are the tropes. You are an outsider. You are presumed to be an outsider of the community. You are presumed not to belong, as if you've invaded our town and you've corrupted our town with your difference. You are treated as a threat to the purity of the identity of the town. Through references to dog whistle politics, such as preserving the true character of the town, preserving the traditions of the town, because you weren't here long ago, or your identity group wasn't here. So by being elected, you're now threatening us, as if there's no common humanity between us, even if we may have a different religion, or we may have a different immigration story, or we may have a different ethnicity. Another form of Islamophobia, racism in general, is denying people the same rights that they are afforded and treating you as a second-class citizen. And the right to dissent, the right free speech rights, are a fundamental right of any resident of the U.S., much less a citizen of the U.S. And so to come and take speech that has absolutely nothing to do with the Board of Education's business, that's conducted in private, and essentially allege that I'm anti-Semitic, is a form of censorship, right? And it's also a form of using, unfortunately, which really, really bothers me, that you would abuse the real oppression against Jews, the real anti-Semitism that does occur in this society, and that you would misuse that for ulterior motives that are self-interested and ideological based on your foreign policy positions, which again have nothing to do with the Board of Education. And I really think that that not only is Islamophobic, but it really does injustice to anti-Semitism. Because a Nazi symbol in a bathroom is absolutely anti-Semitic. And I think all of my colleagues here can agree we've done everything we possibly can to try to figure out who it is. And we're going to continue to. So smearing Muslims with false allegations of terrorism, disloyalty, anti-Semitism, anti-Americanism, those are textbook Islamophobic tropes. And I'm telling you that as a Muslim, and I'm telling you someone who studies that. So I hope we will work on that as part of our DEI here. I hope that we will deal with Islamophobia just like we deal with anti-Semitism, as we deal with homophobia, as we deal with, prejudice against people with disabilities, anti-black racism, xenophobia against Latinos, etc., etc. But I just want to end by saying that what I think is really happening here is also McCarthyistic. And it's part of a broader trend that I'm very troubled by in this town. And that is the attempt to ban books, the attempt to deny the opportunity for students to be trained to be critical thinkers by being exposed to controversial issues, which they're going to be exposed to in college. And so to deny them the opportunity in high school is really a disservice to them as a college educator. I can tell you it's not a good preparation for college. And I hope that moving forward, that those who are no longer here, but are usually here, that we will be more civil with each other, that we will not come and use the podium to engage in smear campaigns and slander people and bring in business that has no relevance to this Board of Education and act with disrespect towards us. The way that we've been treated the last 18 months has been very disrespectful by many members of the public, not everybody. But I think it's time for the public to understand that we're volunteers and we're here to serve the community, and we're not the enemy. But some people seem to come and think that. And I do look forward to having a robust and rigorous diversity, equity, and inclusion, because I think this town needs it. And what I've seen has convinced me even more that we need it. We need more open conversations about race and religion and racism and Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, and we can go on and on. But if the parents are in indicia, or some of the parents, then I think our children certainly need to be exposed to all these different ideas. So I want to thank you very much, and I just want to express, my sense of privilege of being in this elected position and my sense of responsibility to continue on, and that just like we will not allow our students to be bullied, and we will protect our students from being bullied, we also will not accept being bullied. Thank you.
Thank you, Sahar. Any other comments from board members? Try that, Mike.
Is it on? Yeah. I just want to echo some of Sahar's words, because I've been on this board for 6 years. I've been a Westfield resident for nearly 25 years. And Sahar has, just like everybody else at this table, has the right to be on this board, to express her opinions, and is a resident of our community and should be treated equally like every other person in this room. And just when I first came to Westfield, it was like idyllic in a sense, where you had the tree-lined streets and you had the kids playing and riding their bikes. And I come to these meetings over the past 18 months, and I sometimes think back, like, why did I join the school board? And but I'm here, even though my kids graduated last year, to try to make our school district better. And when I see comments come into the email, like there's child abusers on this board, that's not the Westfield I know, and the Westfield I've been on the past 25 years. So I just want to reiterate, when people get up to that podium, just have a little respect for everyone here. I agree that there's differing opinions on this board and in this community, but we're all one, we're all Westfield, and we have to respect everyone in this community. And it just really bothers me sitting here and seeing Westfield people act this way, because this is not the Westfield I know. And we can do better. And let's try. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments from board members? All right. With that, motion to adjourn. Thank you, Amy. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned.